My name is Rachel Vahey and I'm a Product Technical Manager here at Nucleus. Today I'm going to run through 5 things you really need to know about the FCA's current thinking on defined benefit transfers. Defined benefit transfers is still a really hot topic within the advisor profession. At the end of March, the FCA came out with 2 new papers. The first was a policy statement, and this gave us a host of new rules for the handbook. The second was a consultation paper, where the FCA wanted some input from the advisory profession about the new rules that should be set. I'm now going to tell you 5 things you really should know about the FCA's current work on defined benefit transfers. Okay, let's start with number 1. Pension transfer advice is now a personal recommendation. Now, most advisors are working on this basis anyway. The FCA were also thinking about changing the starting assumption that pension transfer is never in the best interests of the client, but they decided to retain that starting position. So the personal recommendation has to either back that up or it has to prove otherwise. Number 2, the pension transfer specialist, or the PTS, has to be kept involved with the whole advice process. That's because they are responsible for signing off the entirety of the advice process, not just the analysis figures, but also where the destination of the transfer is and the investment strategy chosen. So the advisor and the PTS have to work together to make sure that the PTS is fully aware of the transfer. The third thing to be aware of is that the transfer analysis is changing from 1st of October 2018. So it's going to be bye-bye TVAS and hello APTA. APTA is an appropriate pension transfer analysis, so it's a lovely new acronym for us to learn. The APTA is demonstrating the suitability of the personal recommendation. Now, the FCA have said it has to include some things. For example, it has to include a discussion about the outcomes, something about the impact of taxation for the member, and also something about state benefits. But the firm has a lot of freedom about what else it wants to put in the APTA. So it could include cash flow modelling, or it could include stochastic modelling. One thing the APTA does have to include is a TVC, transfer value comparator. This takes the transfer value from a scheme and compares it to the cost of buying exactly the same benefits in the open market through a DC annuity. It has to reflect the benefits that the scheme is offering. The FCA has outlined the assumptions that must be used in the TVC, and there's no deviating from that. You can't pick and choose what you want to do. One of the most interesting assumptions is the accumulation growth rate. Now, this has to be on a risk-free basis. A risk-free growth rate is a gilt yield. From that, you have to take 0.75% for charges. Now, again, that's regardless of what's actually offered by the pension scheme you're transferring to. That could be 0.3 or 0.5. It doesn't matter. You still have to assume 0.75. So those are the 2 new analysis tools which are coming in from the 1st of October. The 4th thing the FCA is working on is whether to ban contingent charging. Now, contingent charging is where the advisor firm only gets paid if the transfer goes ahead. So naturally, the FCA is worried that there's lots of biases tied up in this, and that lots of, or some advisors may be recommending a transfer goes ahead purely to get paid. However, it's not as simple or as straightforward as the FCA originally thought. One of the problems of banning contingent charging is that it might lower people's access to advice. This is because people might not be in the financial position where they can lay their hands on the fee needed for advice, so they financially don't have the money. Emotionally, they may be very reluctant as well to commit to giving the money over. They may not see the worth of paying such a large sum, as they see it, for the advice. So contingent charging could have a number of unseen consequences, and so the FCA is stepping around this issue to try and figure out what's the best way forward. And finally, on to number 5. The FCA's work is not yet done. It is still consulting on a host of other different issues. For example, it wants to set out tougher guidelines on how the PTS and the advisor firm should work together to make sure that both are fully involved. It wants to consult on the qualifications a PTS should hold. Should this be level 4 investment, for example. It's also looking at triage services. Now, this is when a client comes in for an initial chat with the advisor to try and figure out whether they actually want the full transfer advice service. Now, the FCA says this should be a non-advised service. They say that the advisor shouldn't be stepping over the boundary of looking at the personal information of the client. Instead, they should just be talking to the client in generic terms about what the advice process could mean and the sort of things to consider. And finally, the FCA also wants to unpack what the client's attitude to transfer risk is. Now, how should this be assessed? We should be looking maybe at the pros and cons of transferring or the pros and cons of staying, what the client's attitude to investment is generally, what their experience of investment is, and how they feel about giving over their investment fund to someone else to manage. So that's 5 things to know about the FCA's current thinking on defined benefit transfers. Now, this situation is obviously going to continue to evolve. We'll continue to keep you updated as things change. I hope you found it helpful, but if you want any more information, then please check out our super comprehensive fact sheet on the Illuminate Technical Studio. We also have a host of new blogs on the Illuminate Online.